here's how I would calculate my VRS pension if I was in the hybrid plan. All right, first I would go to recatr.flutterflow.app, enter. And so here's the dashboard page. On this dashboard page, there's an age slider here. This age slider is not the retirement age, but is truly a slider that allows us to see what the income would be at a given age, right? So let's assume we have two different pensions. One pension's coming in at the age of 60, another pension comes in at the age of 65. Those two numbers would be different numbers, right? And so if we really just want to see what's happening at the age of 60, we would use this slider. And then if we want to change it and see what happens at 65, we could do that too. So for now, we'll keep this example very simple. And we'll go with 60 years old. Get started. All right, so for this example, we'll assume that this person was born on, let's stick to March 1st, 1985. That's fine. And let's say that they would like to retire at the age of 60. And then let's also assume that right now their salary is somewhere around $85,000. And so between the age of 38, which they are now, and when they retire at 60, their salary will grow. It's not always the same rate, but sometimes it's high, sometimes it's no growth at all. And so we'll make an assumption here that the average annual increase will be somewhere around 2.5%. And so, since they've been hired by Virginia and they're in the VRS plan, right, we would select VRS here. And we would get into this and see how that works out. So for this example, let's assume this person became a member on, let's select here, let's say 2014, let's say July 1st. All right, so let's push this over to July 1st, 2014, that's okay. And we can already see that some information is populated, right? And so first, if we wanted to understand better between Plan 1, Plan 2, and Hybrid Plan, there's some information here on the different dates as to when those plans started. So we're specifically looking here at the Hybrid Plan, right? Which just simply means employees hired on or after January 1st, 2014 with no previous VRS service credit. Okay, all right. Now, this person did not take a refund, right? We're not going to use the refund in this example because that would complicate things a little more. And we're also going to assume that this person has not taken any years off, okay? So some information is down here that we should look at. First, their estimated average final compensation, right? And this is information that's used to make the calculation of what the pension will be. That estimated average final compensation is about $136,000. And if we take a look here, we can see that this is the average of your 60 consecutive months of highest creditable compensation, right? And so in this example, the way this calculation was set up is we assumed that your last 5 years of work, right? Your last 5 years of employment are your highest income years. And then we averaged that out, and that's how we got to $136,000. Your years of service, total number of years that you've worked for the system are 30 years, right? And then your unreduced retirement eligibility age is 60 years old. Now, how did we get to that answer? Let's see here, right? So you become eligible for an unreduced retirement benefit under the defined benefit component when you reach your normal Social Security retirement age and have at least 5 years of service credit, or when the sum of your age and service equal 90 and you have at least 5 years of service credit, right? So this person is 60 years old and they've worked for 30 years, then the sum of those two equals 90. And that's how we came to that answer, which simply means that if they work for less than 30 years, then this number goes up. The age at which they can collect their unreduced retirement eligibility goes up. So with that information, the result is that they would be receiving around $42,000 a year as their pension from VRS. Okay, so that's part one of the hybrid plan. But it's the hybrid plan. It's a little more complicated than plan one and plan two. There's some more information we need to look at. So first, in order to better understand the next set of information, let's take a look at the handbook. All right, so the hybrid plan is broken up into two parts, right? So there's the defined benefit, which is the benefit we just looked at, right? Which is this part of the equation, right? And then there's the defined contribution component, right? And the defined benefit basically means that VRS will give you a pension based on different factors of your employment. The defined contribution component simply means that you now have to take charge and take action with a part of your retirement. You have to participate or choose to participate in part of your retirement. And so that part, that defined contribution component, is broken down into another two parts, right? And so the first part is a mandatory employee 401k contribution of 1%. And then your employer matches that with a 1% contribution too. So we'll look at that first. Let's put this down for now. Okay, take a look here. All right, so it's a mandatory 1% contribution, right? Your pay periods in this case would be 11. Okay. Your employer would match that 100% up to 1% of your salary. Okay. And then your estimated annual rate of return. In this example, I'll be a little conservative. I'm going to use about 6%. It could be higher, could be less, right? But for the sake of this example, I'm just going to assume that the rate of return over time, averaged out, is about 6%. And then we'll assume that you want to start collecting this income, or at least the income from this plan, at the age of 60. And then the current account balance, we can make a couple of assumptions here, right? So we could assume that right now you don't have anything in this account. You should, because if you were hired in 2014 and you're in this plan, then there should be some amount of money in there right now, right? We could make the example very simple and assume there's nothing in there and see where that goes. Or we can assume that there is some money in there. So let's just assume there's maybe $25,000 in there. Take this down a bit. Okay, $25,000. Okay. Now, based on that information, right? So at retirement, you're retiring at the age of 60. Then your estimated assets, the amount of money that you have in this account, will be somewhere around $189,000, which is the same as your collection age. You also want to collect it at 60. But if we changed our collection age, if we say that, hey, we want to collect this at the age of 65 or start collecting at the age of 65, then now that number changes, right? So it's sitting in the account for much longer. It has more time to grow. And so that's really the growth that you see here. At your retirement of age 60, it would be about $189,000, but by the time you're collecting it at age 65, it would have grown to $270,000. Again, assuming an annual rate growth of 6%. I'm going to take this back down to 60. Okay. And I'm going to scroll to the top. And now we can see that there's another dollar value in here of $7,500. And so the way this was calculated is it's actually assuming 4% of the $189,000 that's in the account on an annual basis, right? So we're assuming that you will be pulling 4% of whatever is still left in the account every year. That's how we came up to that number, $7,500. Why 4%? Rule of thumb, it just allows your money to last longer and hopefully last until maybe somewhere around 95, 100 years old, but it just gives your money more running room, right? And so I'm sure there's other formulas out there, but 4% is the formula we've chosen to use. So now you would have your $42,000 pension from VRS, which would be coming to you every year, plus the 4% out of that account, which would be equal to $7,500. But there's one last component that we need to look at. So for now, let's pull up the handbook again. All right. So the last part of the hybrid plan is this voluntary 457 contribution, which you could choose not to participate in, 0%, or participate up to 4% of your salary. In return, if you participate, or if you choose not to participate, then your employer doesn't participate, right? But if you do choose to participate up to 4%, then your employer will match up to 2.5% of your salary, right? So there is a table that we need to find that shows us what that match actually looks like. Keep scrolling down here just to find the table. And here it is. So you could choose not to participate, or you can go all the way up to 4%. And as you can see, your employer starts off by matching 1-for-1, and then it's on a sliding scale, right? So their match is on a sliding scale. But they will give contributions up to that 4%, right? So their match would be at 2.5% if you get to 4%. Okay, so now let's see how that plays out in this calculator. So we've done this part. Okay. Obviously, if you do nothing, the result is you get nothing, right? But let's assume that this person chooses to do the most. So they want to put in 4%. Their pay periods are 11. The estimated annual rate of return, again here, we'll assume 6%. And we'll also assume that they want to start collecting at the age of 60. Now, if they've been participating in this, right, there's one of two ways we can look at this current account balance. We could say, hey, from 2014 until today, they didn't know that they could or they should participate in this plan, or they didn't have the opportunity to do so, or the income to do so, and so they didn't participate, right? And so their account balance is 0. Or we could say maybe they did participate and they have some money in that account, right? And we could guesstimate that they have $25,000. All right, so for this example, we'll just assume they have $25,000 in that account. Okay, and so at the age of retirement, which is age of 60, they would have $284,000 in there. And we've said that they want to start collecting at the age of 60, all right? And so again, it's $284,000. But once again, if I change this, you can see this number growing because it has more time to grow. I'm going to take it back to 60, right? And so the approach would be the same. We would say that we want to take a percentage of this salary take a percentage of this amount. But something else is different too, right? So we're looking now for where the employer matched this 4%, right? So again, from the handbook, if we put in 4%, the employer would put in 2.5%, which is in addition to their mandatory 1%. So really what we're looking for is our employer to put in 3.5% to match what we're doing. All right, so let's see where that shows up. If we come back to the 401A cash match plan, we can see that the employer maximum is now 3.5%. Right? And now to really best see that, let's just take this back to 0. That drops to 1%. That's the mandatory 1% that they're required to give us. Let's say we put this at 1%, right? Now that's a 2%, right? Because if we put in 1, they put in 1, but then they're on a sliding scale. So if we jump up to 4%, they end up at 3.5%. So now our income, or sorry, our assets in this account have increased to match what they have done for us. So when we scroll to the top, we should see different numbers based on what's in this account and also what's in this account, the 457 account versus the 401 account. Okay, let's see what happened. All right, so now we have $42,000 coming in as our pension from VRS. And then we have the defined contribution accounts, these two accounts that have assets in them at our age of retirement. And we have chosen to pull only 4% of what's in the account each year, right? And so that's averaging around 12,500 from the 401A account and 11,500 from the 457 account. And when we add these three numbers up, that now puts us at our total income in retirement, right? So where can we see all of that added up? We'll go back one. And we can see here at the age of 60, we should be receiving $66,000 when we put all those numbers together. That's how this was calculated. All right, so let's get back here. And so we take the three numbers, we add them up, and that gives us our total retirement amount. Now, let's see what else we can look for in here in terms of the information that'd be helpful for us. We can go back to the dashboard. We can see on the dashboard here at age 60, $66,000 coming in, right? I will address this number shortly, but for now, this is how you'd look at it. Let's go back to the profile real quick. Let's make some slight adjustments and we can see how the dashboard helps us, okay? So let's assume that maybe they want to start collecting their 401A account or money at the age of 60, but they want to wait on the 457 income, right? So they want to push this to 65, just so the money has more time to grow. So at age 65, the account would now have 407,500 in it, right? And so we want to head back here, right? So at the age of 60, they're getting less money in, right? Because they've chosen not to collect from the 457 account, right? But we can change this. And now at the age of 65, they would be getting a total of $71,000 instead of the $66,000 they would be getting at the age of 60 had they chosen to collect everything at that age, right? So that's how this slider really helps us. All right, simplify it again, take that to 60, go back to the profile, go back to VRS. And I'm going to drop this to 60. Finally, let's take a look at this number here, right? So this number really, if I actually come back here, the $114,000 that's being shown here, this is the recommended income based on the salary you'd have at your last year of employment, and we've said here at 80% of that. So 80% of your final salary is what your recommended rule of thumb income should be in retirement. That's just general rule out there that helps you, sort of gauge where you should be and how you compare to that number. And hopefully you're close enough to that number. Now, is it a perfect rule of thumb? No, there's various situations with different people. Some people have much less expenses in retirement, others have higher. And so it really varies from situation to situation, but it's sort of a rule of thumb to help you get a good gauge for where you should be, right? And so that's why this number is here. Now, depending on your situation, we put in a slider, and that slider, you can change it, right? Because you might not need all that money in retirement, or you might need more. And so you can take it up, you can put it down. Really, you can adjust it as you see fit to accommodate your situation. So for now, we'll go with 80, which is the rule of thumb. And so that's how we calculate our hybrid pension in VRS. I hope this helped.